Across the world, Tearfund is helping to bring restoration to those living in poverty. But to do this effectively, we need the financial support of organizations with large amounts of humanitarian and development funding. We call these organizations institutional donors. Such organizations include national development agencies, multilateral institutions like the United Nations, and large trusts and foundations. These audiences are very different from others you might speak to, but they provide a third of Tearfund's funding, so knowing how to communicate well with them is critical. If we approach donors without preparing properly, we can waste both their time and ours, damage relationships and Tearfund's reputation, and jeopardize funding opportunities now and in the future. Tearfund's work is motivated by a deep faith, but institutional donors do not share this motivation, meaning we can alienate them if we use language such as God's kingdom, the gospel, Jesus Christ, or even the church. But we don't want to hide our Christian identity either, or ignore the huge development contribution we know the church can make. So these communications require careful thought and preparation. Let's meet one of these donors. This is Sebastian. Sebastian is a country representative for a large institutional donor. He makes decisions on how his government's money is spent. Sebastian works in a high-pressured environment and is always pushed for time. He has obligations, budgets, and deadlines, so is keen to work with people who will give his organization the best value for money. There are often extensive restrictions on how the money he's responsible for can be spent, and he sometimes feels frustrated by this. He recognizes that all programs have political implications and seeks to avoid any damaging media coverage. Like us, Sebastian is passionate about making an impact in the poorest communities. So, how do we prepare for working with Sebastian? When planning your work with an institutional donor, you must remember to consider the 4 important questions for strategic communications. First, ask why you want to communicate. What is the change that you want to see as a result? Let's say you want to secure funding for a project or strategically position yourself for future opportunities, since waiting for a formal funding request can often be too late to start building a relationship. What do you need to learn about the donor organization's priorities, strategies, and ways of working to make that change happen? Second, who is the specific person or group of people you will be communicating with? You need to understand their context, the different layers of needs, experiences, motivations, priorities, and politics that institutional donors constantly have to balance from within their own organization, their host nation, the domestic media, and the international community. Third, what is the message or request? What content will you include to achieve your goals? Knowing how busy institutional donors like Sebastian can be and what they are motivated by, you must be clear about what you need to present to them and how you wish to collaborate. Finally, how are you going to communicate? Face-to-face meetings, a report, videos? Which method or methods will be the most effective? Now let's meet Tamara, one of Tearfund's country directors. There's been a donor request for funding proposals in her country. She wants to use this as an opportunity to build a relationship with the organization. She knows that one of her smaller projects with a local church partner has started to show promising results and would benefit from additional resources, so she is keen to apply for the funding. She decides that she will submit an application, but will also contact the donor directly beforehand to try to book in a face-to-face meeting. This will give the donor a chance to get to know her and help her to make the application as relevant and appealing as possible. Let's see how answering our 4 questions can help Tamara to communicate strategically. First, she reflects on why exactly this communication is needed. She has had minimal communication with the donor in the past, so she reflects on why she wants to engage with them now. The primary reason is her project's fit with the donor's call. More funding would mean that Tearfund can reach many more communities. And there's a second strategic goal. Tamara knows that building a good relationship with the donor will help significantly with future funding opportunities, whether or not this bid works out. Achieving this second objective will take more than just filling out a proposal. Tamara needs to use this application process to understand more about the donor's priorities and ways of working, so that she can tailor future interactions to match the interests of the donor. Next, Tamara thinks about who her audience is. How can she meet them on their level? She hasn't yet met the donor's country representative, Sebastian, but has a friend who knows him socially. Tamara arranges to meet with this friend, and from their conversation, she gleans that when at work, Sebastian focuses on details and is very goal-oriented. She also notes her friend's throwaway comment that in the past, Sebastian has joked that Christians should leave development work to the professionals. Next, she speaks to Tearfund's donor lead about the donor's development priorities and domestic political situation. The donor's home news talks a lot about religious extremism and safeguarding scandals. So Tamara understands she will need to show how rigorous Tearfund's safeguarding processes are and be mindful of how she communicates the organization's Christian identity. Next, Tamara thinks about what her key message is. She decides to hone in on Tearfund's proven expertise and impact with innovations to specifically support marginalized women. She gathers key data about the project from Tearfund's church partner, including the number of people reached and the impact on the health of female community members. As she speaks to the partners, Tamara notes their use of Christian jargon. Terms like Christ-centered, material and spiritual poverty, and church mobilization, which are all likely to confuse or alienate the donor. She considers how she might rephrase these terms without downplaying the role of the church, as well as how she will train and support partners to build their awareness in the future. She knows that by focusing first on the real impact of the project, before speaking about the church, she'll be able to show the value of the work without putting the donor off. She also makes a note of the vocabulary the donor used in the funding request and plans to mirror this language where possible. This will hopefully build rapport and understanding. She lists likely questions that Sebastian could ask her if they meet, including about Tearfund's religious motivations and safeguarding practices, and ensures she has strong answers. Tamara thinks about what the ideal outcome or action from a face-to-face meeting would be for her. From that, she prepares some questions for Sebastian about the donor's emerging priorities and geographic focus areas, as well as their expectations of an NGO partner. Finally, Tamara thinks about how to communicate. While the funding proposal itself needs to be submitted on the donor's template, she knows that any discussions before this could take many forms. She considers what methods of communication have worked well with similar donor representatives. She is confident that her idea to meet him in person is a good idea, as she knows this will create an opportunity to build a meaningful relationship. She calls Sebastian and introduces herself. He agrees to a meeting. In preparation for their meeting, Tamara updates the Introduction to Tearfund branded template, ensuring she includes impact data of past successes and prints a copy for Sebastian. On the day, they meet in a local coffee shop close to Sebastian's office. She brings her technical advisor with her to create confidence in Tearfund's expertise and professionalism. After the meeting, Tamara follows up by emailing Sebastian to thank him for his time and summarize the actions they discussed. She calls Tearfund's donor lead to update them on the meeting and discusses whether they can deliver similar messaging to the donor's headquarters. Finally, Tamara drafts a funding application with her team and submits it. A month later, Tamara receives an email from Sebastian stating that her proposal has been rejected. Although disappointed, Tamara knows it wasn't time wasted. One of her main goals for the meeting she had with Sebastian was to develop a positive relationship with him, and she is confident she has done this. She already has plans for her next steps. So, we've looked at the ways that Tamara has invested her time in communicating well. Now let's go back and consider Sebastian's perspective. Initially, Sebastian's view of church-based development is that it is made up of amateurs who are more interested in converting people than meeting their needs. He has only read negative media reports about other local church leaders, particularly regarding a recent high-profile fraud case. After his phone call with Tamara, Sebastian remains cynical about the faith motivation behind Tearfund's work, but he is impressed by the in-depth knowledge she has about her projects and by Tearfund's commitment to its local partners. At the meeting, Sebastian is impressed by Tamara's professionalism. The data in the branded document convinces him that Tearfund has robust monitoring and evaluation processes and has access to communities that other NGOs have been unable to reach. Sebastian warms to Tamara because of her passion for the program. In addition, her technical advisor answers his questions with ease. He is pleasantly surprised to receive her follow-up email the next morning, clearly summarizing all the meeting's actions. He feels more and more confident that she can deliver. When he reads Tearfund's funding application a few weeks later, it's clear that Tamara has listened to his concerns and worked hard to strengthen the sections that he had anticipated would be weak. Ultimately, when Sebastian has to make the final call, another organization who has applied for the funding has a project that more clearly aligns with his requirements and priorities. He's worked with them before, so he knows they can deliver. But when Sebastian starts to see Tamara more prominently at coordination meetings and sharing status updates from hard-to-reach communities, it convinces him that Tearfund is a credible actor. When she suggests a regular meeting, Sebastian welcomes the idea and is glad to receive occasional emails with progress updates. Over time, they build rapport. When Tamara introduces him to a dynamic bishop who is leading the province-wide feeding program within one of the hard-to-reach communities, he realizes his view of church-based development is too negative. He is impressed by how the church is mobilizing its local community to meet humanitarian and development needs with no help from outside. 2 years later, after another application process and many cups of coffee together, Sebastian is pleased to award Tamara and her team with one of the largest grants Tearfund has ever received from them. This was all made more achievable because Tamara took time to understand Sebastian's motivations and goals. She listened, learned, and asked the right questions. Communicating well relies on finding the values, motivations, and goals that we have in common with our audience, and avoiding language that may unnecessarily alienate or be misinterpreted. Don't be disappointed if you don't achieve your funding goals straight away. Taking the steps to build the relationship is valuable in itself. This was just a brief introduction to communicating with institutional donors. To find out more, click the link in this video's description.